Chapter 1. The fire that does not warm the night. The snow turned the color of ash. No one in the Pamir highlands slept deeply. The mountains did not roar or shake. They simply remembered, and memory, when it rises, does not need violence to announce itself. It began with a faint red glow beneath the snowcaps, as if embers had been buried there long ago and were only now breathing again. The elders would later say the mountains had opened one eye. Rustam was awake before the bells of the fire shrine rang. He always was. The fire he guarded did not allow careless sleep. It stood at the center of a stone ring on the ridge above the valley, fed by no wood, sustained by no oil. It burned as it always had, upright, narrow, silent, but that night it gave no warmth at all. Rustam held his hands inches from the flame and felt nothing. No heat, no comfort, only a faint vibration, like breath held too long. He withdrew his hands slowly. The fire flickered not higher, not lower, but toward him, as if attention itself had weight. Below the shrine, the valley lay folded in darkness. Nomad tents were scattered like forgotten punctuation marks across the slope. Beyond them rose the walls of stone terraces, old enough that no one remembered who had cut them first. Above everything, the Pamir peaks loomed, vast and indifferent, their silhouettes sharper than the stars. Rustam had grown up believing the mountains were deaf. Tonight, he understood they had simply been listening. The first whisper reached him just before dawn. It was not a voice, not exactly, more a pressure inside the skull, like a name trying to surface without permission. Rustam stiffened, his instinct to bow fighting his instinct to run. Firekeepers were trained to recognize hallucination from omen, dream from summons. This was neither. The whisper did not ask, it remembered. A name passed through him, ancient, broken, unfinished. Then another, then a third. Each left behind a trace, not of sound but of weight, as if the air itself had been briefly burdened and then released. Rustam staggered back from the flame. The shrine bell rang on its own. Down in the valley, dogs began to howl. Horses shifted and stamped, eyes white in the dark. Somewhere, a child woke screaming from a dream of falling upward. By the time the sun finally crested the ridge, the snow across the higher slopes had taken on a faint rust-red hue, as if dusted with old blood or powdered brick. By mid-morning, the elders arrived. They came slowly, leaning on staffs polished smooth by generations of hands. None spoke at first. They stood around the fire in a loose circle, careful not to close it too tightly. Tradition mattered, but instinct mattered more. All of them felt it, now the absence of warmth, the presence of something else. This fire has burned since before the passes had names, said Elder Farid at last. It has never failed to warm. It still burns, another replied. Yes, Farid said quietly. That is what troubles me. Rustam told them what he had heard, or rather, what had passed through him. He did not embellish. Firekeepers were not poets. When he finished, the elders did not question him. They questioned the mountains instead, lifting their faces to the peaks as if expecting an answer carved in cloud or stone. One of the younger men laughed nervously. Perhaps it is only a change in the wind. The mountain answered with silence, so complete it felt deliberate. By noon, messengers were sent along the ridges and down the passes. Fires in other shrines were checked. By nightfall, the truth could no longer be softened. 3 fires no longer warmed, and all 3 whispered names, not the same names. That night, Rustam dreamed while awake. He stood within the mountain, not inside a cave, but inside memory itself. Layers of stone unfolded around him, each marked by scorch lines that resembled veins. In those lines burned moments, a betrayal sealed with flame, an oath broken under snow, a city abandoned to save a kingdom. Each memory burned once and was never allowed to burn again, until now. A figure stood ahead of him, indistinct, its edges blurred like heat haze. When it spoke, its voice was not sound, but fracture. "The mountain does not forget," it said, "it endures. You are the ones who bury." Rustam woke, gasping, his palms scorched, not burned, but marked, as if pressed against something ancient and rough. Outside, the wind had risen, carrying with it the smell of iron and cold ash. At dawn, the elders reached a decision none of them wanted. The mountain was remembering fire, and when the mountain remembers, someone must carry what returns. Rustam was chosen not because he was strongest, or wisest, or purest. He was chosen because the fire had leaned toward him, because memory had passed through him without breaking him, because some burdens recognize the shoulders they intend to claim. "You will go upward," Farid said, "toward the peak where the red light was first seen. And if the mountain asks for more," Rustam asked. Farid met his eyes. "Then you must decide whether memory is meant to be kept or burned away." As Rustam turned toward the ascent, the fire behind him flickered once, and, for the briefest moment, it was warm, not enough to comfort, enough to warn. Chapter TWO Ash Paths of the Pamir. Rustam began the ascent before the valley fully woke. He carried no banner and wore no mark of office, only the plain wool of a firekeeper and a small clay vessel sealed with wax, the elders' last concession to caution. Inside, it burned a coal taken from the shrine, dimmer now, but alive. It did not warm his chest where it hung. It pressed like a remembered weight. The path climbed immediately, a spine of stone stitched with old snow. Wind slid across it without rhythm, sometimes rising as if to speak, sometimes dropping into a hush so complete that Rustam could hear his own pulse. He had walked these slopes since boyhood, yet the mountain felt altered, not hostile, not welcoming, but attentive. Footsteps did not echo, they were received. By mid-morning, the snow changed character. It no longer glittered, it dulled, as if dusted with fine ash. Rustam knelt and brushed a patch aside. The rock beneath was scored with thin, branching lines, old burn marks, healed and reopened. He recognized the pattern from his dream. Memory veins. A shape moved ahead, just beyond the next rise. Rustam reached for the coal instinctively. The wax seal thinned, not melting, but loosening, as if consent were being negotiated. The figure resolved into a woman leading a pack goat. Her hair was braided with bits of blue cloth, faded to the color of distance. She stopped when she saw him, eyes narrowing, not in fear, but appraisal. Mountain folk did not waste emotion on surprises. "You're walking into remembering," she said, as if naming the weather. "I'm walking upward," Rustam replied, "which is often the same." She smiled once. Only when the mountain chooses. They walked together without agreeing to it. Her name was Soraya, a carrier of salt and stories between high passes. She said the night before, her goat had refused the usual path and stood braying toward a peak no one climbed anymore. "Animals notice before people," she said. "People argue." As they climbed, signs accumulated. Wind eddied, in hollows where it never lingered. Snow slumped from ledges without sound. Once, the coal throbbed hard enough that Rustam had to stop, breath-catching, until the pressure eased. Soraya watched, said nothing, then offered him water that tasted faintly of iron. Near the old switchback, they found the first cairn disturbed. Stones lay scattered, their lichened sides turned inward, as if ashamed. Beneath them, a circle of blackened earth breathed cold. Rustam knelt again. The marks here were fresher. Someone burned recently, Soraya said. No, Rustam said, and surprised himself with the certainty. Something burned back. They reached the shelf by late afternoon. From there, the Pamir opened in all directions, peaks stacked like held breath, valleys folded into shadow. At the shelf's center stood the ruin of a fire altar no one maintained anymore. Its basin was empty, its stones cracked, but the geometry remained precise, stubborn. Memory favored symmetry. The wind gathered. It did not roar. It arranged itself. Rustam felt it align with the coal, with his pulse, with the scars beneath the snow. Names brushed the edge of hearing again, shorter now, sharper. Soraya stepped back, instinctively giving space. A heatless flame lifted from the altar, pale and vertical. It was not bright, it was clear. Rustam understood then, this fire was not asking to be fed. It was asking to be witnessed. Images unfolded, not visions, but compressions of time. A caravan rerouted to avoid a storm, condemning a village below. An oath sworn to protect a pass, then quietly abandoned when winter came early. A shrine neglected, not out of malice, but convenience. Each memory burned once, left its mark, and went dark, until the mountain called it back. Soraya gasped. It's too much. It's choosing, Rustam said. He stepped closer. The flame leaned not toward his hands, but toward his chest. The coal in the vessel answered, brightening without heat. Wax parted. The vessel cracked. The flame folded inward. Not into him, through him. Rustam did not scream. There was no pain. There was accounting. He felt the mountain's patience, vast and exacting. He felt the cost of forgetting, measured not in years, but in paths lost, winters worsened, names erased from use. He felt to the limit of memory that if all were kept, nothing could move. When it ended, he sank to his knees. Soraya steadied him, her grip strong, practical. What did it want? She asked. Rustam swallowed. For someone to decide. Behind them, the wind shifted, already loosening its attention. The altar's flame dimmed to nothing. Snow resumed its quiet work. They descended at dusk. Below, lights flickered in the valley fire's warming hands, cooking bread, keeping wolves at a respectful distance. Ordinary flames, necessary ones. At the last bend, Rustam stopped. The coal was gone. In its place lay ash, fine and light. The elders won't like that, Soraya said gently. They'll understand, Rustam replied. Though he was not certain, he was certain only of this. The mountain would remember again, and next time it might not choose him. He looked back once more. The peaks were dark now, unlit, patient. Some memories, he said, are meant to burn. Others must be carried. Soraya nodded. And some, she said, turning down the path, are meant to teach us when to stop climbing. They walked on. Chapter 3, The Names That Refuse the Wind. They reached the valley after nightfall, when fires had already claimed their small islands of warmth, and the darkness between them felt deliberate. Word had traveled ahead of Rustam's return, not by messenger, but by posture. People saw the way he walked now, slower, As if gravity had learned a new argument, Soraya parted from him without ceremony. In the mountains, shared paths did not require promises. The elders gathered at the shrine before he spoke a word. They saw the ash on his palms, the empty vessel, the way the fire no longer leaned toward him but stood straight, indifferent. When Rustam told them what he had witnessed, he did not describe images. He named consequences. He spoke of paths, erased oaths thinned by winter, shrines abandoned because memory had become inconvenient. He spoke of a fire that demanded decision, not devotion. Silence followed, heavy as felt. Farid finally nodded. Then the mountain has moved from warning to reckoning. That same night, the winds changed direction twice without weather to justify it. Smoke from hearths fell flat, then rose suddenly, then scattered as if pushed aside by unseen shoulders. Dogs refused certain alleys. Horses pulled at their tethers and turned their heads toward the north-facing peaks, ears forward, listening. By morning, the first name appeared. It was carved shallowly into a stone near the river crossing, not newly cut, but revealed, as if erosion had chosen that hour to remember. The name belonged to a clan elder who had died decades earlier. No one spoke it aloud at first. In Pamir custom, names carried weight. To speak one was to invite its attention. By noon, more names surfaced. On terrace walls, on shrine steps, on the flat face of a boulder that had never before shown a mark. Some were honored names, some disgraced, some forgotten so completely that arguments broke out over who they had been. The wind moved among the debates, stirring dust, lifting edges of cloth, never settling. Rustam walked from mark to mark, his ash-stained hands clenched. Each name pressed against him, not demanding reverence, but acknowledgement. He understood now the mountain's method. It was not accusing, it was returning inventory. They refuse the wind, Farid said quietly, standing beside him. Names that should have thinned with time, but did not. They were buried, Rustam replied, not released. The elders convened again, but their authority felt altered. Memory had stepped beyond counsel. When they spoke, it was no longer to decide what should be done, but to ask what could be done without breaking what remained. That night, Rustam dreamed of the wind, learning letters. It traced names across the snow, then tried to lift them. Some rose easily, dissolving into breath. Others resisted, heavy with use, dragging furrows behind them until the wind faltered. From the highest ridge, the mountain watched, without expression. He woke before dawn with a certainty that frightened him more than the fire had. Some names could not be carried any longer. At first light, a delegation arrived from a neighboring pass. They brought stories, not greetings. Their own stones had begun to speak. Names surfaced there as well, different, but bound by similar omissions. A shrine keeper had fled in the night, unable to bear the whispers. A child had traced a name in frost and collapsed, weeping, without knowing why. The remembering is spreading, Soraya said, having returned with the delegation. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were sharp. It follows roots, trade paths, old alliances. Memory travels like fire, Rustam said. Along what once connected, a decision pressed itself forward, unwelcome but precise. The elders felt it too. To allow the names to surface everywhere would paralyze movement. Paths would choke on meaning. To erase them again would provoke the mountain's patience past endurance. We choose a place, Farid said at last. A single site where names may return and be answered. A burned ground, someone whispered. Rustam nodded. Not destruction, release. They chose a high saddle between valleys, exposed to clean wind and visible from afar. Stones were cleared. An old fire ring was rebuilt not as shrine, but as threshold. People brought names scratched onto slate, traced in charcoal, spoken into cloth. Some came willingly, others resisted, clutching their burdens, as if losing them meant losing themselves. When the first name was placed at the center, the wind paused, not stilled paused. Rustam stepped forward. The ash on his hands lifted, caught in a small spiral, then fell again. He spoke not the name, but the truth attached to it, the choice made, the cost paid elsewhere. The silence that followed, the fire ignited without heat, pale and vertical. The name burned cleanly, leaving no mark. One by one, others followed. Some names burned easily, others flared, resisted, screamed in soundless pressure that bent knees and stole breath. A few refused entirely, slipping from the fire and etching themselves deeper into stone. Those, Rustam understood, were not ready. They would require time, more consequence. By nightfall, the wind moved again, not aimlessly, purposefully. It carried ash across the saddle, down into both valleys, light enough to settle without weight. Fires below warmed as they always had. Children slept, animals calmed. The mountain did not glow. Farid stood beside Rustam, exhausted. This cannot be your task alone. It isn't, Rustam said. But it will keep choosing someone. The elder studied him, and when it chooses again. Rustam looked toward the peaks, dark and patient. Then we will see whether memory still needs fire, or something colder. The wind rose, carrying no names. Chapter 4, Where Memory Turns Cold. The days following the first burn were quieter, but not calm. Quiet was merely the mountain holding its breath. The valleys resumed their routines. Herds moved, bread baked, fires warmed, but beneath every action ran a thin thread of caution. People spoke more slowly, choosing words as if names themselves might surface uninvited. Rustam felt the change most clearly in the fire. It warmed again, but unevenly. Some mornings it flared with familiar comfort. Other mornings it burned thin and distant, as though remembering something else while doing its duty. He no longer slept beside it, not from fear, but respect. The fire had ceased to belong to him, the elders argued in smaller circles now. Authority had fractured into listening. No decree could contain what was unfolding, and everyone sensed it. The burn ground had worked, but only partly. Names had been released, yes, but others had resisted, carving themselves deeper into stone. And with each resistance, the mountain's patience shortened by an amount no one could measure. Soraya returned from the upper passes with troubling news. Glaciers are groaning, she said, crouched by the shrine fire, not shifting, old crevasses opening where none were marked. Paths we thought were safe are reconsidering us. Rustam looked at his palms. The ash marks had faded to faint gray lines, but when the wind rose, they tingled. Fire alone won't finish this. No, Soraya agreed. Fire is for confession. This, she gestured toward the peaks, is judgment. The mountain chose again that night. Rustam knew before the summons came. The cold arrived first, not the honest cold of altitude, but a precise, invasive chill that crept inward, settling behind the eyes and beneath the ribs. He stepped outside and saw frost forming patterns on stone that mirrored the scorch lines he had seen higher up. Memory veins, but frozen. The elders joined him without being called. This is not for many, Farid said. this is for one. Rustam did not argue. He had learned the difference between courage and delay. He prepared quietly, layered wool, rope, iron spikes, worn smooth by generations, and no fire. Fire would not be welcome where he was going. They told him of a place avoided, even in stories, a north-facing hollow where the sun never settled long enough to argue with ice, a basin of blue-white stone where sound thinned and breath felt borrowed. It was said that fire once died there, not extinguished, but refused. If names would not burn, Forid said, they were taken there to be cooled. Rustam nodded. Not erased. No, Forid said softly. Preserved until they can be born. The ascent was harsher than before. Snow was deeper, the wind less conversational. It cut, tested, withdrew. Rustam moved deliberately, every step a negotiation. The mountain did not hurry him. It waited, which was worse. At the rim of the hollow, the world changed character. Sound flattened, wind slid rather than howled. The basin below glowed faintly, not with light, but with a density of cold that made the air shimmer. At its center stood pillars of ice fused with stone, natural, ancient, exact. Within them were shapes, names, not carved, contained. Rustam descended slowly, heart steadying into a rhythm that matched nothing human. As he approached the nearest pillar, the cold intensified, pressing memory inward. He saw flashes, choices deferred, harms minimized until they became invisible. Victories that depended on silence elsewhere. These names had resisted fire, not out of innocence, but weight. A crack sounded behind him. The basin answered. A low, structural groan passed through the ice-stone pillars, like a spine adjusting. One of them fractured, not breaking apart, but opening just enough. Inside, a name pulsed, dark and heavy. Rustam understood the mountain's intent. Fire released what could be acknowledged. Cold would hold what could not yet be faced, preventing it from resurfacing and poisoning movement. But cold required a keeper. The fracture widened. The name strained forward, seeking air, witness, consequence. Rustam stepped between it and the open basin. The cold bit deep, numbing fingers, slowing thought. He placed his hands against the pillar. There was pain now, clean, sharp, necessary. I see you, he said, not to the name, but to the choice behind it. You will not move today, the ice answered by sealing. Slowly, deliberately, the basin stilled. Sound returned in cautious increments. Rustam collapsed to one knee, breath ragged. The mountain had taken something from him, not strength, not life, but margin. He would feel this cold again. It had learned him. On the descent, the wind shifted to his back, not assisting, merely allowing. By the time he reached the lower terraces, his hair was rimed white, and his hands shook uncontrollably. Soraya met him halfway. You look like winter borrowed you, she said, gripping his arm. Only for a moment, he replied. It will want me again. Below, the valleys breathed easier. No new names surfaced that night. Fires burned evenly. Paths held. Farid listened to Rustam's account and closed his eyes. So we have learned it, he said. Fire for release, cold for restraint, and for the rest, Soraya asked. Rustam looked north. For the rest, the mountain will choose something else above them. The peaks stood unchanged, patient, remembering, waiting for the next lesson to be required. Chapter 5: The Weight That Walks After the Cold. Movement returned cautiously to the valleys, like animals testing a clearing after fire. Trade resumed along the lower passes. Herds were driven higher again. children ran without glancing upward every few steps. To an untrained eye, the world appeared repaired. But Rustam felt what others did not. The mountain had not finished speaking. It had merely changed the instrument. The first sign was subtle. A man named Colloquel, light, careful, unremarkable, failed to arrive home one evening. He was not lost on a pass. His tracks ended cleanly at the edge of the village, as if he had stepped out of the story altogether. Searchers found no disturbance, no sign of struggle, only a curious heaviness in the air, as if the space he had occupied resisted being filled. By morning, 2 more absences were noted. Not vanishings exactly. People remembered them clearly. Their names did not surface on stone or frost. Instead, their roles felt suddenly unfinished. Nets unrepaired. Animals unsettled by a missing hand. Conversations paused mid-sentence without knowing why. "The mountain is walking memory now," Soraya said, after listening to the reports. "Not carving it, not burning it, carrying it." Rustam did not reply at once. He had dreamed of this possibility in fragments, memory given legs, consequence made mobile, fire released, cold restrained. What remained was burden. That afternoon, Rustam felt it himself. He was crossing the shallow ravine near the shrine when the air thickened. Not cold, not hot dense. Each step required intention. His breath shortened, not from lack of air, but from resistance. Then he saw it. A figure moved along the opposite slope, slow and deliberate. At first glance, it appeared human, wrapped in layers of cloth, but its gait was wrong to even, to patient. As it descended, Rustam noticed the cloth was not cloth at all, but overlapping textures, ash-dark fabric, frost-pale leather, stone-gray folds that caught no light. Names shimmered faintly across it, not readable, but present. The weight had come down from the mountain. It did not look at Rustam. It did not need to. Its presence pressed upon him anyway. Memories stirring, not his own, but adjacent. Choices made by others that had shaped the ground he stood on. He staggered, dropping to one knee, palms to earth. The figure passed. Where it stepped, the ground did not crack or burn or freeze. It simply remembered harder. Rustam felt the valley shift, not physically, but ethically. The weight moved toward the cluster of tents by the river. When it reached them, nothing dramatic occurred. No collapse, no scream. The weight stood among the dwellings, and people felt, each in their own way, the return of something deferred. An apology never given, a warning ignored, a cost passed downward because one woman fell to her knees, weeping without knowing why. An elder removed his ring and set it on the ground, hands shaking. Kolek's wife looked up suddenly and whispered his name, not in grief, but recognition. The weight moved on. By dusk, Kolek returned. He walked into the village with the careful posture of someone carrying a load too heavy to set down. His eyes were clear, but older. He spoke little. When asked where he had been, he answered only, "With what I forgot." The elders convened immediately. Fear was present, but not dominant. Understanding was emerging, and it was worse. "This is no punishment," Farid said. "It is balance." "Balance kills," someone argued. "So does avoidance," Farid replied. That night, Rustam dreamed of roads bending under invisible cargo, of people walking straighter once they felt the weight they had left for others, of the mountain watching, not approving, not condemning, only measuring. In the days that followed, the weight appeared twice more, never in the same place, never announced. Each time, someone returned, changed, not broken, but burdened appropriately. No one died. That frightened people more than death would have. Can it be stopped? Soraya asked Rustam quietly, as they watched smoke rise evenly from hearths. Yes, he said, but not removed. How? Rustam thought of the fire, the cold basin, the walking burden. 3 instruments, 3 truths, by teaching people to carry what belongs to them. Before the mountain assigns it, they began with the elders. At the burn ground, they invited voluntary reckoning, not confession, not trial acknowledgement. People spoke of small choices that had compounded, of silences that had saved face but cost others. Names were spoken, then released to fire if they would burn, or entrusted to cold if they would not. The weight did not appear that day. It appeared the next, near the old caravan route, where traders had once diverted water quietly for profit, leaving downstream fields thin. The weight stood until the men responsible stepped forward, not in terror, but recognition. When they did, it moved on without taking them. Word spread, not as law, as gravity. Rustam felt the mountain's attention ease, just slightly, not retreating, satisfied enough to wait. Farid clasped Rustam's arm. You've changed how memory moves. No, Rustam said, only how people meet it. That night, the wind moved freely through the valley, unburdened by names, unshaped by commands. Fires warmed as they should. The cold held where it was meant to. And far above, the mountain stood, not finished, but no longer impatient. The weight did not return again that season. Rustam knew it would. Some lessons required walking. Chapter 6. The silence that measures summer climbed the valleys without announcement. Snow retreated from the lower ridges, revealing stone warmed by long patience. Paths reopened. Markets grew loud again. To those who did not look closely, the season appeared generous. To Rustam, it felt calibrated. The weight did not return. That absence was not comfort. It was assessment. Silence settled into places that had once argued, not the silence of fear, but the silence of listening. People corrected one another less. They asked more questions, whose answers might take years. Fires burned evenly. The cold basin remained sealed. The mountain, for the first time since the remembering began, seemed to look elsewhere. Then the animals began to refuse. It started with horses. A string bound for the eastern pass halted at a familiar bend and would not move forward. No whip could convince them. No voice soothed them. They stood, muscles tense, ears fixed on nothing visible. When the riders dismounted and walked ahead, the horses followed until the same bend, where they stopped again, hooves planted, breath flaring. Sheep did the same yesterday, Soraya said, when Rustam told her goats did not panic. Judgment. Rustam walked the bend alone. He felt it immediately, a thinning of sound, a narrowing of choice. The air itself seemed to ask for justification. He turned back before his steps could become an answer. The elders gathered at the shrine, not to debate. Debate had become inefficient, but to inventory. Where had memory been released? Where restrained? Where carried? They traced roots on the ground with chalk and charcoal. The pattern that emerged was not geographic, it was habitual. The mountain is measuring movement now, Farid said. Not what we remember, but how often we repeat. That night, the silence deepened. It arrived after dusk and stayed. No insects, no distant hooves. Even the wind moved carefully, as if not to disturb an accounting in progress. Rustam lay awake and felt his own thoughts slow. each one weighed before completion. He realized then that silence was not absence, it was capacity. Before dawn, the silence chose. It took no form, no figure, no cold or heat. It simply stood in the narrow pass above the valley, unseen and absolute. Those who approached felt it as hesitation so complete it became instruction. People turned back without shame. Trade paused. Travel deferred. The mountain had closed a doorknot forever, but deliberately. A council formed by necessity. Messengers arrived from distant valleys, reporting similar closures. Not everywhere selectively. The pattern sharpened. Routes used most often to avoid consequence were now unavailable. The mountain was not punishing commerce. It was interrupting convenience. Rustam understood the escalation. Fire had addressed denial. Cold had addressed refusal. Weight had addressed displacement. Silence addressed habit. How do we answer silence? Soraya asked. You don't, Rustam replied. You change. They began with the smallest adjustments. Routes lengthened. Goods redistributed locally. Old skills resurfaced out of need, not nostalgia. The valley learned to wait again. The silence did not lift, but it loosened, permitting movement that carried intention rather than escape. Then the mountain asked for a witness. Rustam felt the summons as a pressure behind the sternum, precise and unavoidable. He went alone this time, up a ridge where sound had thinned to thought. The pass beyond lay open, but only barely a slit in the world, measuring resolve. At the crest, the silence gathered into coherence, not speech, not image, a scale. Rustam felt himself placed upon it, not judged, but compared. His actions weighed against their reach, his restraint against his influence. The scale tipped, adjusted, weighted. A truth settled into him, clean and unflinching. Systems outlast people. If he remained the hinge, the valley would become dependent on him. Memory would learn his shape and stop looking elsewhere. The silence eased. When Rustam returned, he spoke plainly to the elders. This must end with me stepping aside. Farid closed his eyes. We knew. You will teach, Rustam continued, not rules, postures. How to notice before fire is needed. How to pause before cold is required. How to carry weight before it walks. And you, Soraya asked. I will leave, Rustam said, not far, not dramatically, enough that the mountain must choose again. They did not argue. The silence had already instructed them. At dawn, the passes reopened, not all, not wide, but sufficiently. Animals moved again. Trade resumed slowly, changed. The weight did not appear. The cold basin held. Fires warmed. Rustam packed lightly. No coal, no ash, no mark of office. He walked along a secondary path, one that had never been important enough to abuse. At the bend where the horses had stopped weeks earlier, he paused. The silence touched him once more, gently this time, like a nod. Then it withdrew. Above, the mountain remained, patient, exacting, unfinished. Below, the valley continued without him, not because he was no longer needed, but because it had learned how to measure itself. Chapter 7. The Place Without Echo. Rustam did not leave the mountains. He slipped between them. The path he chose was not marked on any map the elders kept, not because it was secret, but because it was forgettable. It wound through shale and scrub, crossed water that had never learned a name, and climbed toward a shelf of stone where sound behaved strangely. When he spoke there, his voice did not return. It was not absorbed. It was accepted. He stayed. At first, days passed without incident. Rustam learned the rhythms of the place. When shadow arrived early, when frost lingered too long, when birds circled but did not land, he repaired a low stone shelter, abandoned long before memory had required instruments. He hunted sparingly, gathered carefully, and let hunger teach him restraint. The mountain did not address him. That, too, was instruction. Below, the valleys adjusted to his absence. Forid found that decisions took longer but settled deeper. Soraya discovered that trade routes, when redrawn by necessity, carried stories more honestly. The elders learned to ask not what tradition demanded, but what consequence would follow if nothing changed. The silence returned occasionally to certain paths, but it no longer closed them entirely. It narrowed them, inviting choice rather than imposing it. Then, late in the season, the echoes failed. It was noticed first by children. They shouted into ravines and laughed when their voices did not answer back. At first, it was novelty. Then it spread across slopes, along ridges, into the old amphitheater of rock, where elders once tested calls. The land was developing pockets where sound would not return. The mountain is making places to speak without being heard, Soraya said, uneasy. No, Farid replied. Places to speak without being answered. The implications unsettled them. Echo had always been reassurance, proof that the world acknowledged utterance. Without it, speech became risk. You could say something and never know how it landed. That night, Rustam dreamed of the shelf where he lived, filling with footprints that made no sound. When he woke, there were tracks outside his shelter, human, recent, deliberate. He followed them to the edge of the echoless hollow. A young man stood there, breathing hard, eyes fixed on the drop. I didn't know where else to go, the man said without turning. Rustam waited. They told me the one who listens lives up here, the man continued. They said you won't answer. Rustam said nothing. The man swallowed. My name surfaced, not burned, not frozen. It walked. Rustam felt the weight shift in the air. Did you carry it? I tried, the man said, but every step felt borrowed, like I was moving with someone else's legs. They stood in the place without echo. Words fell and stayed where they landed. Finally, Rustam spoke not as keeper, not as witness, but as neighbor. Then it isn't finished with you, he said. And you aren't finished with it. The man closed his eyes. What do I do? Rustam gestured to the hollow. Speak what you did, not to me. To the ground. It won't answer. That's the point. The confession came haltingly at first, then with momentum. A diverted warning, a silence chosen for comfort, a consequence passed to a stranger because it was easier than facing it at home. The ground listened. The air did not judge. When the man finished, his shoulders dropped, as if he had set something down, not gone, but no longer hidden. What now? He asked. Now you walk back, Rustam said, on your own legs. The man hesitated. Will it follow? Only if you leave it behind again. By the time the man descended, the echoless hollow felt altered, no warmer, no brighter, but aligned. Rustam understood then. The mountain was creating thresholds, places where accountability could occur without spectacle, without amplification. Memory, once so loud, was learning discretion. More came. Not crowds, individuals. Each found the shelf by rumor and intuition. Rustam did not gather them. He did not lead. He listened when listening was required, and he withheld response when it would become permission. The place did the work. Below, the elders noticed fewer disruptions. The weight did not appear. The cold basin remained sealed. Fires burned evenly. The silence visited rarely and withdrew quickly. The mountain's attention had redistributed. One evening, Soraya climbed to the shelf. She said nothing at first, only sat and let the absence of echo settle into her bones. So this is where memory goes when it learns to stand on its own, she said finally. This is where it learns not to perform, Rustam replied. She nodded. The valleys are changing, slower, less certain, more honest. Rustam looked toward the peaks. Then the mountain is almost finished. Soraya frowned. Almost. It will ask one more thing, he said. It always does. As if summoned by the admission, the wind rose not strong, not cold, not carrying names. It passed over the shelf and paused, just long enough to acknowledge the place without echo. Then it moved on. Rustam felt a loosening he had not known he carried. The mountain was no longer holding him in reserve. It was preparing to release him not downward, not away, but outward, into a world that now knew how to listen without demand. Below, a child shouted into a ravine and laughed when nothing answered. The laughter lingered anyway. The mountain watched, and for the first time since memory had stirred, it did not measure. Chapter 8. The wind that does not carry autumn arrived without color at first. The leaves along the lower slopes did not blaze or fall all at once. They thinned as if the land were reducing itself carefully. From the shelf without echo, Rustam watched the season adjust its weight. The mountain was no longer instructing. It was observing the consequences of what it had already taught. The wind changed. It still moved, still shaped clouds and cooled skin, but it stopped carrying. No names rode its currents. No warnings arrived ahead of events. Smoke rose straight and fell back on itself. Sound traveled only as far as intention allowed. The valleys noticed quickly. Messengers arrived late. News no longer outran experience. The wind has learned restraint, Soraya said when she climbed to the shelf again, her face weathered by long roots. Or it has been taught. Rustam shook his head. It chose. Below them, the world grew local. Decisions stayed near their origin. Mistakes were not softened by distance. People argued less about what others should do and more about what they themselves could bear. The absence of carried consequence felt, at first, like abandonment, then like clarity. The first real test came from the eastern ridge. A mining group, small, quiet, determined, began cutting into a stone seam exposed by retreating ice. They said little, offered payment, avoided ceremony. The elders hesitated. The stone was not forbidden by any old rule. The silence did not block the path. The fire did not lean. The cold basin did not answer. The weight did not walk. By all prior measures, the mountain consented. Within days, the cut deepened. Tools rang sharply, their sound swallowed by air that no longer returned echoes. Rustam felt the wrongness from the shelf knot as warning, but as imbalance. This was not forgetting. This was taking advantage of quiet. He descended at dusk, meeting the miners at the edge of their work. He did not introduce himself. He watched. "What do you hear?" he asked, finally. One man laughed. "Nothing. That's the blessing." Rustam nodded. "Then listen again." They paused. Without echo, the ring of metal sounded incomplete, as if half a sentence. Beneath it lay something else. Not a voice, not memory, but tension. Stone under strain, ice remembering pressure. The mountain was not silent. It was withholding amplification. "This cut will travel," Rustam said, "not as collapse, as cost." "Where?" the leader demanded. "Not "Away," Rustam replied. "Into you." They continued anyway. 3 days later, the stone shifted not dramatically, not enough to trap or kill, just enough to force a man to choose between dropping his tool or bracing his partner. He chose the partner. The tool fell, struck the seam, and split it wider than intended. Water seeped out, cold, steady, unremarkable. By morning, the cut was flooded, unusable. The miners packed without complaint. No one accused the mountain. They had felt the decision arrive inside themselves before it arrived in stone. That night, the wind brushed the shelf without stopping. Rustam understood the final instrument: non-carriage. When nothing carried consequence for you, you carried it yourself. The place without echo filled again, not with confessions, but with questions. People came asking not what they had done wrong, but how to know when silence was permission and when it was restraint. Rustam answered carefully, often indirectly. If the wind does not carry it, he told them, ask whether you are willing to. Winter's edge touched the peaks early. Snow returned to the higher passes, light and undecided. The mountain did not close roots this time. It narrowed attention. One evening, Farid climbed to the shelf, older now, slower, satisfied in a way that needed no defense. The valleys no longer wait for signs, he said. They act, then live with it. Rustam smiled faintly. Then the mountain is finished teaching, and you. Rustam looked out over the folds of land that had learned, at great cost, how to govern their own memory. I will leave the shelf, Farid frowned. Where will you go? Where the wind still carries, Rustam said. Not to correct it, to see what happens when it stops. The wind passed again, light and empty-handed. Below, fires warmed. Ice held. No names surfaced. No weight walked. No silence closed the world. The mountain did not watch this time. It rested. Chapter 9: The city that refuses to be remembered. Rustam left the shelf before dawn, when the stone still held night in its seams. He did not look back. The place without echo did not ask for farewell. It had already returned what it borrowed from him: attention, patience, the discipline of listening without demand. The road led downward into the basin where the old city lay. From a distance, it appeared as it always had: domes like frozen waves, glazed tiles, the color of deep sky, minarets stitched into the horizon with thin, vertical certainty. But as Rustam approached, the air thickened. The wind, though present, lost direction. It moved as if uncertain which memory to follow. This was the city beneath the blue dome, not buried by sand or ruin, but by forgetting that refused to finish its work. At the outer gate, merchants argued softly, with guards who no longer carried insignia. Names had been scraped from plaques. Dates were rounded into vagueness. The city did not deny entry. It denied context. What city is this? A traveler asked. The guard considered, then shrugged. The one you are entering. Rustam stepped through. Inside, streets bent in ways that made maps impatient. Courtyards repeated themselves, with slight errors, like a story retold by someone who believed the meaning mattered more than the order. Blue tiles climbed walls and domes, but their patterns never quite closed. Every motif suggested continuation beyond its visible edge. He felt it then. The city was not hiding its past. It was refusing to be finished by it. At the central square, a market unfolded without urgency. Sellers did not shout. Buyers did not bargain hard. Transactions occurred with a calm that came from shared uncertainty. Rustam paused at a stall, selling glazed fragment pieces of broken tile polished smooth. From where? He asked. From where they fall, the vendor replied, or where they are removed. Removed. The vendor smiled. When a pattern starts insisting too strongly on what it means, the city corrects it. Rustam bought a fragment. Its blue was deep, almost black at the edges. When he turned it in the light, the color shifted, not brighter, but older. He followed the sound of water to the cisterns beneath the main dome. There, steps spiraled downward into cool shadow. The dome above filtered light into a constant twilight, making time irrelevant. The water reflected the ceiling with such precision that the city seemed to exist twice. Once, below, an old woman sat by the edge, feet bare, sleeves rolled. She was washing nothing. "You are late," she said, without looking up. "I did not know I was expected." "Everyone who listens eventually arrives," she replied, "but not all stay." Rustam sat across from her. "What is this place?" "The city that learned what the mountain taught," she said, "but applied it differently." He waited. "The mountain removed echoes so people would carry their own weight," she continued. "We removed certainty so memory would stop ruling us." Rustam frowned. "Memory is not a tyrant." "No," she agreed, "but it is a convincing governor." She dipped her hands into the water. Ripples spread, distorting the reflection of the dome. "We were becoming perfect at remembering," she said. "Perfect monuments, perfect grievances, perfect pride. So we learned how to let the city forgets, lectively. Who decides what is forgotten?" "No one," she said. "That is the rule." Rustam understood then why the wind behaved strangely here. It did not carry names because the city did not release them. Sound softened. Stories lost edges. The past could be visited, but not inhabited. "Why am I here?" he asked. The woman finally looked at him. Her eyes were sharp, unburdened. "Because the wind stopped carrying where you came from, and here it never learned how." That night, Rustam stayed in a caravanserai whose walls were lined with blue tiles, deliberately mismatched. Sleep came in fragments. Dreams began and ended without resolution. He dreamed of the mountain, but it had no summit. He dreamed of the shelf, but it echoed one sand, then refused to do so again. At dawn, the city shifted, not physically, but in emphasis. A street he had walked the night before now led somewhere else. A door appeared where none had been. People did not comment. They adjusted. In the square, a crowd gathered, not in alarm, but recognition. At the center stood a pillar newly risen, its surface undecorated, unfinished. A man spoke not loudly, but clearly. "The city has reached its limit," he said. "Something must be remembered fully, or something must be released entirely." Murmurs moved like low wind. "What?" someone asked. The man looked toward Rustam. "The mountain's silence," he said. "It is arriving here." Rustam felt it, then a pressure, familiar but altered. The weight did not walk, but it pressed inward. The city had avoided consequence by blurring memory. The mountain had enforced consequence by removing echo. Now the two disciplines were colliding. "If the city forgets this," the man continued, "it will forget itself. If it remembers, it will bind the future to a single shape." Eyes turned to Rustam not as judge, but as witness. He stepped forward. "The mountain taught that when nothing carries for you, you must carry it yourself," he said. "The city taught that when memory rules too much, life stops breathing. So what do we do?" the crowd asked. Rustam placed the blue fragment he had bought at the base of the pillar. "You do neither," he said. "You choose incompletion." The crowd stilled. "Mark this," he continued, "but do not finish it. Speak of it, but allow disagreement. Remember it, but let it change when it must. The pillar did not react, the wind did not respond, but the pressure eased not, vanished, eased. The old woman by the cistern smiled when Rustam returned the fragment to her. "It will hold," she said, "for a while, and then it will need to be carried again." Rustam looked up at the Dumblu, immense, unfinished in its meaning. He understood now, the journey was not from mountain to city, or silence to memory. It was between disciplines of restraint, and the wind, unreliable, unfaithful, was learning where it could move without ruling. Rustam left the city at dusk. Behind him, the dome caught the last light and released it without promise. Ahead, the road bent toward places where neither silence nor memory had yet been tested. The wind followed, not carrying, not leading, just present. Chapter 10. The road that will not be named. Rustam did not mark the road when he left the city beneath the blue dome. No stone, no knot of cloth, no backward glance that might harden into ritual. The city had taught him that names, once fixed, begin to command. So he walked without naming where he went, and the road answered by remaining open. It did not promise arrival, it offered continuity. Beyond the basin, the land widened into a pale steppe stitched with canals that had forgotten their builders. Water moved slowly, patient with the sun. The wind here had recovered its direction, but not its certainty. It crossed Rustam's path, paused, then continued, as if considering alternatives. He felt the weight again, not the mountain's strict pressure, not the city's diffusing blur, but something intermediate, a demand to choose without the comfort of permanence. At noon, he reached a caravan of weavers, traveling between oases. Their looms were collapsible, their patterns provisional. Rustam shared bread and listened. They spoke of markets that vanished between seasons, of rulers whose decrees were obeyed precisely until they were no longer relevant, of domes repaired with mismatched tiles because exactness was a luxury the road could not afford. "Where are you headed?" one weaver asked. "I am walking," Rustam said. The weaver nodded, satisfied. "Then keep your pace. The road dislikes being hurried into a purpose." They warned him of the salt flats, a hidden expanse, where the ground glittered like certainty and betrayed it at every step. "Names sink there," the weaver said. "So do oaths." Rustam entered the flats at dusk. The surface reflected the sky so convincingly that horizon dissolved. Each step produced a sound like breath caught in the throat. He remembered the mountain's lesson. When echo is removed, you learn the mass of your own movement. Here, sound returned to much of it. Every footfall multiplied, ricocheting across the plain, as if the ground were eager to confirm existence. He stopped. The echoes continued without him. The salt flats were not a place, they were a test of attention. Rustam slowed his breathing, aligned his steps with the wind's pause. When he moved again, the echoes diminished, confused by restraint. The plain accepted him not as a declaration, but as a passing condition. Near midnight, he saw lights, low, steady, unadorned. A camp stood at the flat's edge, its fires shielded by stone. People moved with deliberate economy. Their tents were marked not by symbols, but by wear. Rustam approached and waited to be acknowledged. A woman with salt-cracked hands gestured him in. "We do not ask names here," she said, "only burdens." "I carry lessons," Rustam replied. She smiled faintly. Heavy, but negotiable. They ate in silence. The camp's elder, a man whose beard had learned the color of distance, spoke after the meal. "The road ahead forks," he he said. One path leads to the archive of deeds, where everything done is recorded precisely. The other leads to the orchard of revisions, where what was done is retold until it becomes useful. Which is safer? Rustam asked. Neither, the elder said. Safety is a byproduct, not a destination. Rustam slept lightly. His dreams arranged themselves into choices and then refused to select. At dawn, he stood at the fork. The archive's path was straight, paved with stone tablets set flush with the ground. The orchard's path wandered, soft with leaf litter and the sound of water turning on itself. He chose the space between. At first, there was no road, then there was made by walking. The wind approved by not interfering. Rustam felt the weight adjust, redistributing. This was the discipline the city had hinted at, choosing incompletion, not as evasion, but as method. By afternoon, he reached a low ridge overlooking a valley where a city was being planned and unplanned at the same time. Stakes marked foundations. Others had been pulled up and stacked neatly. Blue tiles lay beside unglazed brick. A dome frame rose, paused at half its curve. The people below moved with purpose that did not insist on finality. A planner approached Rustam. We are deciding what to leave unfinished, she said, and what to finish only enough. Why? Rustam asked. Because finished things demand defense, she replied, and unfinished things invite care. She led him to the half-dome. We will cap it, she said, but we will leave the pattern open, so it can receive what the years bring. Rustam recognized the discipline neither mountain nor city alone, but a synthesis that required constant attention. What do you call this place? He asked. She shook her head. Not yet. That evening, a dust storm approached from the west. The valley prepared not with walls, but with adjustments. Awnings lowered, stakes reinforced, fires banked. The half-dome sang softly as wind passed through its ribs, producing a tone that was neither warning nor welcome. Rustam stood at the ridge and felt the weight press harder now. This was not a place that could absorb pressure indefinitely. It would require a principle. When the storm arrived, it did not devastate. It tested. Structures flexed. Some collapsed by design to be rebuilt better. Others held because they were not asked to hold more than they could. After, the planner returned to Rustam. You carry something, she said. Not authority. Alignment, he considered. Alignment is temporary. She nodded. Then help us place it. They placed no stone. They agreed on a rule. Every generation would choose one thing to finish and one thing to unfinish. The rule was written, then deliberately smudged, so the smudge became part of the text. As night fell, Rustam felt the weight ease not disappear, but settle into proportion. The wind found a path through the half-dome and kept it. He left before dawn. The valley did not ask him to stay. It asked him to return if needed. The road ahead remained unnamed, and therefore available. As Rustam walked, he understood the work now, not to found cities or empty mountains, but to teach how to hold pressure without becoming rigid, how to remember without being ruled, how to build without pretending to finish. Behind him, a dome began to curve toward completion and stopped at the right moment. Ahead, the wind waited not to carry, not to command, but to witness movement done with restraint. Chapter 11. The measure of what remains. The road narrowed after the unnamed valley. Not because the land constricted, but because Rustam's attention did. He had learned that wide horizons invite excess intention. Here, the earth offered only what could be held in view at one time. a line of scrub, a shallow ravine, stones shaped by repeated passage rather than deliberate carving. The wind followed him more closely now, not carrying messages, not resisting measuring. At a crossing where two minor paths intersected and immediately lost themselves again, Rustam encountered a circle of stones. They were not old enough to be ancient, not new enough to explain themselves. Each bore a shallow mark, identical in depth but varied in width, as if many hands had agreed on pressure but not on form. He knelt and traced one groove. It was the measure of a palm pressed flat. A woman emerged from the ravine, carrying a bundle of reeds. She did not startle. She had expected someone eventually. "You're late," she said mildly. "For what?" Rustam asked. "For the question," she replied, setting the reeds down. "Everyone comes here to ask it. Few arrive before it forms." She introduced herself as Inara, a keeper, not of the stones, but of the practice that placed them. "We measure what remains," she said, "after storms, after departures, after corrections. We do not measure loss. Only what insists on staying." She showed him how the marks were made, not with tools, but with hands pressed into wet stone, mixed with ash and water. The mixture hardened slowly, forgiving haste but punishing force. If you press too hard, if you press too lightly, it erases. The depth is learned. Rustam stayed. Days passed without announcement. People came alone or in pairs. Some pressed their palms and left without speaking. Others lingered, uncertain. Inara offered no instruction unless asked. When asked, she answered with a question that redirected attention to the hand itself. A man arrived with a caravan's worth of stories and pressed too hard. His mark cracked a week later, hairline fractures radiating outward. He returned to repair it, learned restraint, pressed again lighter. The crack remained, but it no longer spread. "We don't erase damage," Inara told him. "We cap it with care." Rustam took his turn last. He mixed ash and water, feeling the ratio settle under his fingers. When he pressed his palm, he did not think of the mountain or the city or the half-dome valley. He thought of weight distributed. The stone accepted the pressure without complaint. That night, the wind shifted. It did not carry sound, but it carried temperature, cooling the stones evenly. Rustam felt the weight move again, consolidating. This was not a lesson meant to travel far. It was designed to stay put, to be revisited by those willing to return. Inara walked with him at dawn. "You won't stay," she said. "No," Rustam replied, "but I'll remember the depth." She nodded. "That's all this place asks." They reached a rise where the land sloped toward a basin Rustam had not yet seen. The air there was still, expectant. Inara stopped. "Beyond this," she said, "the work ends or begins, depending on your honesty." Rustam thanked her and descended alone. With each step, he felt the accumulation of lessons settle into a single constraint, not a command, but a boundary he would not cross again. He understood now what remained after all corrections, not structures, not names, not even rules, but measures of pressure, of memory, of restraint. At the basin's edge, he saw water reflecting the sky without distortion. No dome, no mountain, no echo, just surface and depth agreeing temporarily. The wind waited. Chapter 12, Finale. The weight that can be set down the basin did not announce itself as an ending. It lay open and undecorated, a shallow mirror of water held by low stone and grass, worn flat by weather rather than feet. No paths converged there, no markers warned or welcomed. It was a place that existed only because nothing had claimed it. Rustam stood at its edge until standing felt unnecessary. He sat, then lay back, letting the sky arrange itself above him. The wind did not circle. It did not pause. It moved on, indifferent in the precise way that signaled completion. For the first time since leaving the mountain, Rustam felt the weight loosen without redistributing. It did not migrate into another task. It did not sharpen into principle. It simply waited as if asking whether it was still required. He closed his eyes and listened, not for echoes, not for carried names, but for residue. What remained when all lessons had been learned enough? Memory surfaced, but without urgency. The mountains, pressure, exacting and impersonal. The city beneath the blue dome, diffusing authority into shared care. The road that refused naming. The stones marked by hands that learned depth. The half-finished dome that sang only when the wind passed through at the right angle. None demanded allegiance now. They existed as completed incompletions. A sound reached him, then not from the wind, not from the basin, but from within the ground itself. A slow vibration, almost imperceptible, like a breath exhaled after a long hold. The land was not speaking, it was releasing. Rustam sat up. At the basin's center, the water trembled, not in alarm, in recognition. He waded in, the cold rising to his knees, then his waist. When he stopped, the water stopped with him. When he moved again, it followed, not resistance, alignment. He understood then what the journey had been calibrating toward, a place where weight could be set down without being transferred, where responsibility could be acknowledged without being carried forward indefinitely. He reached into the water and lifted nothing. The weight responded by settling into the basin, not as mass, not as burden, but as capacity. The water deepened slightly, enough to matter, enough to hold. Rustam laughed softly, surprised by the sound. It did not echo, it did not vanish. It simply existed, then ended. Time passed, or perhaps it did not. The distinction no longer applied. When Rustam finally stepped out of the basin, his footprints filled immediately with water and smoothed away. The land accepted movement without recording it. At the basin's edge, he saw others approaching, not summoned, not guided. They arrived as one arrives at shade, after walking long enough in sun. Some carried tools, some carried questions, some carried nothing at all. They did not ask Rustam who he was. They did not ask what this place was called. They knelt, touched the water, and felt the subtle shift, the permission to wrest responsibility without abandoning it, to remember without rehearsing, to build again only if needed. A child stepped forward, testing the water with a stick. "Does it keep things?" the child asked. Rustam considered. "It keeps what is set down honestly." "And what happens then?" the child pressed. "It becomes available," Rustam said, "to anyone willing to lift it again." The child nodded, satisfied in the way only children are when answers do not overreach. As evening approached, the sky darkened without drama. No fires were lit. None were needed. The basin reflected the stars imperfectly, blurring constellations into patterns that invited invention. Someone began to hum not, a song remembered, but a line discovered in the moment and then released. Rustam felt the last instruction complete itself inside him. He was no longer a bearer of alignment. He was a witness to its circulation. When he finally turned to leave, no one stopped him. The basin did not follow. The weight did not return. The road did not present itself. Rustam walked anyway, knowing that walking without assignment was no longer escape but equilibrium. Behind him, the basin remained unnamed. It would not become a city. It would not become a shrine. It would not demand guardians. It would exist as long as people continued to set things down carefully and lift them only when necessary. Far away, the mountain held. The city beneath the blue dome continued its work of remembering and revising. Valleys finished and unfinished their chosen tasks. Hands pressed stone to the depth they had learned. The wind carried what it could and refrained when it should. And in the wide spaces between, responsibility learned how to rest. The story did not end. It became light enough to leave behind.